Anyway, but yeah, thank you. So one of the things I want to talk about really today is about the reality for financial service enterprises and how we work with those enterprises to address those challenges. It's an interesting world. So firstly, a little bit about me because maybe BMC and myself are not quite as familiar in this kind of forum as some as household names like Google and Microsoft. But me personally, I'm now approaching 30 years in technology. I've been around service management and operations management that whole time. Been a developer, a systems owner, a consultant. I've worked a lot in financial markets as well. So as you see, and especially in Europe, I've done quite extensive project work at places like RBS, LCH, Aegon. Also, I like to be a kind of a bit of a troublemaker in the ITSM space because it's been around a long time. So I was one of the authors of one of the ITIL 4 books, which was a real modernizing push for service management, bringing it into the era of DevOps and Agile. And that kind of path has taken me to a lot of conference stages around the world at some big DevOps conferences too. So as you know, interesting sort of moonlighting in the DevOps world, despite being anchored in service management. And BMC ourselves, BMC Helix is part of the BMC software organization. And although we might not be a household name like Google, we have tremendous penetration into the biggest markets in the world, the biggest companies in the world. So nearly 9 out of 10 of the Forbes Global 50, and in particular, large financial and insurance organizations. We have significant presence, whether that's mainframe or distributed computing or digital business automation or a combination of all those things. So a lot of you, even if we're not front and center of sort of the household name worlds in technology, I'm sure a lot of you have crossed paths with our solutions, particularly in the financial industry, particularly in the enterprise space. And one of the things that brings us a lot into working with the enterprise space, I thought was summed up by this. I read this a number of years ago now, and I think it really emphasized the financial market situation for enterprises, where there was this big assumption that everything could kind of be shifted to the cloud. We were going to see this big transformation, even in enterprises, to the latest and greatest. And absolutely, financial enterprises are implementing the latest and greatest. They're having to, and we'll touch on that in a moment. But this quote was amazing. This was kind of almost a career anchoring thing for people like me. It's like there is still going to be a long lead time where a typical digital transaction is going to be crossing both newest technology and the oldest technology. Think about when we change, I encourage people at BMC to think about when they move money from one bank to another. These days, I'm picking up a phone to do that, especially here in Australia. But when I hit that button, all hell is breaking loose for the next 20 seconds around the world. If I'm transferring money from an old bank in the UK to a bank in Australia, the complexity of the technology behind that is tremendous. We're hitting mobile technology, cloud technology, we're hitting AI tools, we're hitting mainframe. And that complexity is a huge challenge for people in IT in banks. And in fact, it's one of two challenges. So let's think about those two major challenges. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with this. Established financial enterprises are under huge competitive pressure in the digital era. I was reading earlier about Monzo Bank in the UK, which is one I always track because it's very interesting. Monzo has been in the UK for 10 years now. They were founded 10 years ago. Of course, the UK is one of the oldest banking markets in the world, not the oldest, but certainly one of the oldest. And yet, even in 10 years, Monzo now have 1 in 5 of the UK population having a current account with Monzo. They added 1 million people just in the quarter to June in a country of 60 something million people. So incredible growth driven by being a modern digital new experience, meeting a lot of demands. So major banks are having to change, they're having to change quickly, but at the same time, the big established banks are under massive regulatory pressure, and that just increases all the time. So we saw DORA implemented in the EU this year, actually coming live, the Digital Operations Resilience Act. That carries fines of up to 2% of total annual worldwide turnover for breaches. In the US, with the FFIEC really kind of cranking up the pressure on technical organizations, banks are very focused on the URSIT score, the Uniform Rating System for Information Technology. And I recently asked an American banking technical executive, why do you care so much about that? And his reply was, well, how much do you care about your credit score? Which I thought was a very good answer. So this is the world we're dealing with. And so we have both business challenges, that competitive pressure, that huge rising of expectations from users. I kind of effectively transact across two different countries because, as you can hear, I don't sound very Australian. I actually am, but my mother went on holiday in 1968 to the UK and forgot to come home. So, we see now things instantly. I can transfer money instantly from the UK to Australia and convert it instantly. Insurance companies are under pressure now, not to settle in weeks, but to settle in hours. And yet at the same time, all that pressure is on not to break stuff, not to fail. So the technology challenges behind that are significant too. We've seen a lot of banks over the years still trying to manage complicated services on spreadsheets and with poor or segmented discovery tools. And a lot of tools struggle to walk that path from the newest technology through the oldest technology to really track the services that are running users' transactions. Then finally, of course, they're having to move quickly. If banks sit still in this world where banks like Monzo are emerging and coming straight for their customers, if they don't innovate, if they don't make those services meet those demands, then they're going to fall flat. So a lot of the companies who talk to us are talking about how do we contain that risk? How do we make sure we can implement the fastest methods, how we can do really good DevOps-driven, agile product innovation and not break stuff and manage that intrinsic risk of all the complexity of our systems, which is a really interesting world for us all to work in. And I'm pleased to say, we've got a really strong track record of working with major banks to address these challenges, to set up the platform for innovation and to ensure that they're meeting their compliance needs. And this is a great story. This is one of my favorite stories of all our customers' stories. This is one of the largest financial institutions in Europe. They were a long-time customer of BMC, both on the mainframe side and on the service management. But everything was still pretty ad hoc. The service management tool was an older on-premise one. So the challenge they brought to us was, how do we achieve our DORA objectives? We're EU bank, they're ratcheting up the pressure. We've still got to innovate. We still have to understand our business services. How can we do that? So we actually started, which makes me happy as an ITSM person by background. They started by fixing IT service management. We helped them move to much more cloud-based, modern service management, service and operations management platform that gave them the control over assets, over change, over even making sure that they resolve incidents more effectively. In doing that, we got some great improvements, like the number of incidents resulting from failed changes went down by more than 50%. So simply establishing better control over risk and practice has a huge impact. In parallel, though, we were modeling and discovering their services. It's incredible to me how many large companies still cannot tell you what their services look like, but it's reality. So you need really great discovery technology to do this these days. Things are too complex to track on spreadsheets. They're too fast moving to manually manage. So with effective discovery, you can then build on the next stage. And this is where we've really been investing heavily in AI on the operations side, on the discovery side, on the service mapping, so that you constantly have this very dynamic map that understands those digital services in real time, because they change faster than you can design the changes. That is the nature of a complex adaptive system. You have emergent properties, you have continual change, you have unforeseen consequences, you have all that stuff going on. That is a challenge both to safely innovating fast and also to meeting the demands of these heavy-handed regulators. So with this bank, we focused on what they called their CFS, their critical financial services, implemented that service modeling, but also implemented very AI-driven capacity management and modeling. Capacity is a huge focus of regulators. Prove to us that you can deal with spikes, that you can handle outages, that if you're hit by a ransomware attack, you have a third copy of all this data that you can restore from to deliver that recovery quickly. Lots and lots of different things that impact these banks need to be addressed with very, very effective understanding of their services, very, very effective understanding of the behaviors, the capacity, the things that are going on. So with this foundation now, we were able to establish for this bank 100% DORA compliance. That's what they've achieved with working in partnership with us by establishing this very detailed, automated, dynamic knowledge of services and the structure of the practices around them, the change risk analysis, the incident response. It's all in place, and they've achieved real success on that. So that kind of helps us now move forward with them and move into the era of agentic AI and really start to bring their next capacity forward. So a typical model from our perspective, how do we work with these large banks to get them to the point where they have that operational resilience to meet the needs of the regulators, to hit their URSIT score, to hit DORA compliance. If you're transacting in the in the US and Europe, you're worrying about both of these things. And then there's equivalent legislation in Australia and in Hong Kong and in the UK and all over the world. So it is about, firstly, you've got to understand those services. It's a classic enterprise technology problem, as we've already said. And we do that by discovery. We do that by automating the mapping of services. Let the tools determine what is interacting with what a typical business service looks like. Then you can also be understanding with that knowledge, what are the third-party services we're dealing with? What contractors, what technology partners, what hyperscalers are critical to the operation of these services, because that's a major focus for the regulators too. Then with risk management, with these models, we can, with this amazing AI technology we now have, we can start even being the friend of the DevOps teams, not a typical ally of service management. And in those cases, what we're doing is we're saying, you can contain the risk of making change to your code internally with the DevOps process. And DevOps has changed the world in terms of delivering code fast, effectively. The challenge for DevOps teams in large enterprises is they're throwing it into this big, complex, adaptive world, which isn't as well contained and controlled. And so there will be consequences, there will be risks. With AI technology, we can establish those risks much more firmly. And actually, the benefit of that is you can innovate more, not less, because most of the time you're affirming that that team is doing a good job. So capacity optimization, identification of key things like end of life. We just build this cycle of maturity, which gets us to the point where you have a flow of operational resilience practice. You can simulate capacity, you can respond to issues, you can remediate vulnerabilities automatically. With this framework in place, you have the basis of a very confident response to the regulators to say, yes, we're in control, we have full visibility, we have great risk management, we have instant response practices. And by the way, we also have all these dashboards in place that can prove it to you, sit and read and enjoy. So that's what we do. And we're known, I think, we're probably well known as being involved in the infrastructure management, operations management. What I will say now as well, just like the other companies on this call, agentic AI is front and center of what we do now. It's basically 100% of our R&D investment, building on the platform we have, building real high-end agents. I think we're seeing a trend in the ITSM world of putting a GPT, an unfortunate trend of putting a GPT interface over existing features and saying, hey, that's agentic now. What we're building is not going for that megapixel wars. We've got 1,000 plus, 1 million agents. We're going for a solid stable of very effective multi-skilled AI agents. And if you look on this diagram, we see things like DORA Governor. These are things focused very specifically on financial governance. They're tailored to that process. They're designed to monitor, maintain, report on compliance and highlight issues and remediate them. So this is an area we're specifically targeting as a real frontline AI capability. And that's really why we're here. We're a big company in our marketplace. It's a strongly competitive marketplace, but we are differentiating ourselves from some of the obvious competitors, not only because we are 100% focused on technology management. We're not trying to compete with customer service tools. We're not trying, CRM tools rather. We're not trying to go places where we don't have that deepest expertise. We know IT, and that's why we're focusing our effort. We can be deployed on any cloud environment at all. And we can use any AI models at all. We're not trying to railroad customers into using our proprietary cloud technologies or AI models. And that's very popular in the financial services world, because one of the benefits of that is there's twofold, really. One is that they already have existing agreements with Google or with Microsoft or with OpenAI and want to use those service credits and not pay us to host a little rogue satellite AI system. But also, it means that companies are in charge of their own data. We're not pulling people's data into a proprietary AI model. We're augmenting their AI technology with our distinct differentiation. And with that, that gives that platform for regulatory compliance. It gives a platform for safe and effective, fast innovation. And it does it in a way that's really at the leading edge of agentic AI. So it's actually a really exciting time to be working here. And I've been here a long time. Um, it was a 15-minute slot, so I will finish hopefully within that 15 minutes, Ron. But what I will say that we have a lot more information on the website here at this link, and that includes things like free demos, walkthroughs, and the ability to contact an expert if you want to know more. As I say, we do have a real broad understanding of the financial enterprise market. We work with most companies in that market. So if you're interested in more, please feel free to get in touch. And as I say, if you go to this link, there's some really nice working, click-through demos, hands-on demos, guided demos that allow you to get more visibility of all the things I've talked about. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. And Ron, hope that's hope that's what you're expecting to see.
Oh, I think that was great stuff.